You know, the Boeing 737, it's more than just a plane. It's an absolute icon. For over half a century, it has been the workhorse of the skies, one of the most successful commercial jets ever built. But just a few years ago, that incredible legacy was plunged into a catastrophic crisis. So how did it all go so terribly wrong? Let's get into it.
This is really what this whole story is about. 346. That's the number of people, passengers and crew, who lost their lives in two separate crashes of the brand new 737 MAX. This is the number that grounded an entire global fleet and shook the very foundations of one of the world's most storied companies. And the thing is, this whole crisis unfolded with just terrifying speed. First, in October 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 goes down. Then, just 5 months later, it happens again. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. And within days of that second crash, boom, the entire worldwide fleet of the 737 MAX was ordered out of the sky. I mean, that's a completely unprecedented move for a modern airliner. So that leads us to the big question, right? The one we're going to try and answer here. How did this happen? How did the newest version of the world's most popular jet, a plane that was supposed to be a symbol of safety, become so infamous? To really get it, you have to go back to the beginning, to the incredible pressure that kicked this whole thing off. See, the story of the MAX, it doesn't actually start in a Boeing factory. It starts with their biggest rival, Airbus. This was an all-out war for control of the incredibly profitable single-aisle jet market. Okay, so back in 2010, Airbus drops a bombshell. They announced the A320neo, the new engine option. It had these massive, incredibly fuel-efficient engines. Now, the A320 was a much newer design, right? So it naturally sat higher off the ground. Plenty of room for these huge new engines. But Boeing, they were stuck with a design from the 60s. Their planes sat super low to the ground, and that created a massive, massive problem for them. And you can see on this chart just how big of a threat this was. The A320neo was a smash hit. It was gobbling up the majority of new orders. I mean, airlines are obsessed with fuel costs. It's their biggest expense. So they started flocking to Airbus. Boeing was in real trouble. They were losing their grip on the market, and they had to do something, like yesterday. All right, so here's the key. Boeing couldn't just design a brand new plane from scratch. That would take, a decade? By then, Airbus would own the entire market. They had to update the 737. But this is exactly where a design decision from 50 years ago came back to bite them hard. It all came down to this one thing, ground clearance. The 737 was designed way back in an era of smaller engines for airports with different equipment. It just sits way closer to the tarmac than a modern plane like the Airbus. So what does that mean? Well, it means those amazing, super efficient engines that Airbus was using, no way they were going to fit under the 737's low wing. The engineers found a workaround, of course. They moved the engines a bit forward and a bit higher up. That fixed the clearance issue, but, and this is a huge but, it created a whole new, really dangerous problem. The plane now had this tendency to pitch its nose up all on its own. So to fight that dangerous nose-up tendency, Boeing's solution wasn't hardware, it was software. They created a little piece of code called MCAS. It was supposed to be this clever, invisible fix. Instead, it became one of the most infamous pieces of software in history. So, MCAS, it stands for Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Kind of a mouthful. Basically, its only job was to automatically push the nose of the plane down in certain flight conditions. And here's the brilliant business part of it. The goal was to make the new MAX feel and fly exactly like the old 737s. Why? Because if it flew the same, airlines wouldn't have to spend a fortune on new simulator training for their pilots. That was a huge selling point. But this elegant solution was, a recipe for absolute disaster. First off, this incredibly powerful system relied on a single sensor, a little vane on the side of the plane called an angle of attack sensor. And here's the kicker. That part was known to fail. Second, to make sure they could sell this plane with no new training required, Boeing basically downplayed the whole system to regulators. They made it sound like no big deal. And the terrifying result of all this, the pilots getting into the cockpit of this brand new jet had absolutely no idea this software even existed. They had no idea it could literally fight them for control of the airplane. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth could decisions like this even be made? And a lot of people, insiders, investigators, they all point to something deeper. A huge shift in Boeing's culture, a shift away from engineering pride
and towards financial performance. You can actually trace this shift back through a few key moments in the company's history. It really starts around 1997 with the merger with McDonnell Douglas, a company that was laser-focused on the bottom line. Then, a few years later, in 2001, the corporate HQ moves out of Seattle, the engineering hub, all the way to Chicago. This literally put 1,000 miles between the executives making decisions and the engineers building the planes. And it all kind of leads up to that 2011 decision to just modify the 737 instead of building a new plane, a decision that was all about saving time and money. And if you want a smoking gun for this culture shift, look no further than this quote. This is from the former CEO, Harry Stonecipher. He said, and I'm quoting here, "When people say I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent. So it's run like a business rather than a great engineering firm." I mean, wow, it's a shocking admission, really. So you've got management pushing this business-first philosophy from the top. But down on the ground, the engineers were getting really worried. Just listen to this chilling internal message that came out later. An employee writing during the MAX's development. "Would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't." That just says it all, doesn't it? So you add it all up, the technical shortcuts, the business pressures, the culture change, and the consequences were just devastating. What followed has been a long, painful, and very public reckoning for one of America's most iconic companies. The fallout was just immense. You had a 20-month global grounding, the longest in modern aviation history. Investigators dug up all these damning internal messages that revealed just how much went wrong. And make no mistake, this crisis is far from over. We all saw it in January 2024, right? An Alaska Airlines 737 MAX has a door plug just blow out in midair. That led to another grounding and proved that these deep-seated quality control problems are still very much a reality. And all of this leaves Boeing and really the whole aviation industry with this one massive, profound question. You see, the 737's half-century legacy was its greatest strength. It's what allowed for faster development, cheaper training for pilots. But that exact same legacy, that's what created the problem in the first place. That's what backed them into that corner. It really makes you wonder, when does a legacy stop being an asset and start being a liability? And at what point do you just have to say, okay, it's time to start over?